have a card which is human impact on the natural greenhouse effect. And the cards I picked were atmosphere and carbon dioxide. For atmosphere, the definition here is the mixture of gases that surrounds the Earth. The atmosphere begins at the surface of the Earth and extends into outer space in many layers. Most processes that affect life on Earth happen in the lowest atmosphere of the lowest layer of the atmosphere nearest the Earth's surface. So for me, the simple way or the simplest way that I'll just explain that is the fact that the Earth is surrounded by the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is actually made up of different elements. We have gases, we have so many other things that actually help the Earth to remain habitable for human beings. And without the gases surrounding the atmosphere, the Earth would have been too cold for human beings and for living organisms to exist. So in a community in Ghana where I know the people believe in God as a supreme being, I would say that God actually put those gases there in a very good quantity that is just enough to keep us alive. But activities from humans, then I'll give examples like burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and so many other things that we are doing has caused an increase of those gases beyond what God put there. So then, some of the impacts that we ourselves have identified have been as a result of these gases being more than what should actually have been there, put there by God. And so the gases prevent the heat that is on the Earth from going back up. So the gases sort of, when it's too much, then it forms a blanket over the Earth. And if you put yourself under a blanket for too long, you feel hot. So then the heat that is trapped by the gases, which we have increased to a level that is more than what God put there, makes us see some of these bad impacts that we are seeing in our environment. And one of the main gases that we have been producing through some of these activities is carbon dioxide. So then I explain what carbon dioxide is.
Wonderful. Let's give a applause. Thank you so much. Well, thanks for everyone. So we proceed to the second presentation, the snapshot session for Toolkit. And this presentation is related to the toolkit that is called Training of Trainers. I just need to find the presentation here. Okay, so we're getting started this Training of Trainers, climate change and the role of forests. And we are just looking at some of the resources that are part of this toolkit. A toolkit that has posters, has vocabulary cards, and has 3 manuals. So we'll talk a little more detail about each of these resources and how we use it. And the outline of this presentation will be brief, but very concise in the sense that we will talk about the rationale and background of how we came up with these materials. Then what is the main objective of the Training of Trainers program and this course, and what is the structure of the course and how we use the toolkit. And then we'll give an example of a TOT workshop agenda. Okay, so just as a rationale, everything started in all these trainings related to red readiness, to developing projects for forest carbon, and then looking at the necessity to address specific needs on related to training. Very simple, all these kind of definitions. And it was because the audience was very diverse, and in all these kind of trainings, the social issues were always raised. And during those technical trainings that were happening in Africa and Central America, and using all these stakeholder dialogues in DRC, Suriname, and Guatemala, there was a need to fulfill the demand of didactic materials that not only would explain the topic, but also would help to have resources to replicate it. So the approach was just to develop content and pilot a workshop that would receive feedback, and we could revise it and use it as a resource. And we came up with the main objective, that's developing and making a simple, practical, objective, and handy climate change information package that will be easy to be shared at the community level. Most important objective in the sense that we are taking the approach of just sharing the information and sharing the science-based information as what's happening on climate change, what climate is related, and how ecosystems and the role of forests are related in the forest carbon cycle. And based on that, create a dialogue and share learning experience of how this is related to my impacts in my community. And based on this information, how can I participate actively in what is more convenient. So the objective was to create also a skilled team of local trainers that will be able to provide this training and model to communities and stakeholders interested in climate change. And having what we were talking in the morning, there was cultural mediators and people who could put into context all this scientific information, this information that is very general, put it into the reality. In the sense that sometimes we talk about climate change and we see ice melting and we are maybe in mountains, but how it's related and why this example helps and how do you take it to the reality of your community, that's where you work with the trainer who is receiving this kind of workshop. Then about the level of information, make it very basic and decided for field dissemination. And make it handy in a way that we don't need to have a PowerPoint or a projector to make a training. Or we can just have a sort of posters that we can hand out in the forest and just spend a part of the morning talking about specific issues or specific areas that the persons are interested to learn about. And then develop a course for these trainers that could be developed in 4 to 5 days as an intensive training, and that the duration will depend also on the audience and the availability of time of these persons. So the training of trainers and this full toolkit and manuals contains first 5 sessions of information. The first session goes to understand the basics of climate change, understanding what is the difference between time, between weather and climate, then what are the impacts of climate change, and then go to understand on session 2 the causes of climate change, and specifically what is the role of the forest in the forest carbon cycle, and how the forests are contributing to the mitigation and capture of CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. So it's understanding the role of forests in climate change, and then take, after understanding how forests contribute to the mitigation of climate change, to a third session where we talk how this has evolved in the policy arena at international level, how this has been a concern since 1980, since, well, more than 36 years, but how, for example, the UNFCCC and the IPCC have worked since 1988, what are the main structures of negotiation, and in very, very basic, what is happening in the policy arena, how, what is a COP, what is a delegate, who represents, for example, a country, who are the delegates that represent a country, what do they negotiate, and why it's important to participate in those negotiations, and basically to understand that this is something that is happening at international level, at a policy level, and that is somehow related and taking back to the grassroots and to the local level, at planning for REDD readiness and also planning for REDD strategies according to each country. Then going to session 4 and talk about ecosystem services, talking about the difference, first defining what is an ecosystem, how many, what is the contribution of ecosystems, not just in terms of climate and just regulating climate and reducing the amount of concentration of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, but also all the related benefits that are received from the forest beyond things that are quantified, such as water, but also all the non-tangible and all the non-tangible elements that are cultural and that are really related to the livelihoods and to the real local cultural beliefs of each community. So it's an exercise during these all sessions of not only doing a one-way presentation and one-way dialogue, but having an exchange, and go through each of the sessions explaining the main concepts that are used and the jargon that are used in all these kind of conversations and participatory processes that are happening around the world around climate change, but also taking it into the context and really seeing how this is applied in their communities and the reality of each person. Finally, after understanding the role of ecosystem services, is also understanding what and how has evolved the payment of ecosystem services, and why ecosystem services can be quantified at a certain point because they are providing clean water, they are providing services that can be retributed, and that not necessarily comes in terms of money, but comes in benefits of reducing risk, reducing vulnerability, and also having livelihood, improving your livelihoods, not in terms of monetary terms. And on session 5, finally, after wrapping up everything, understanding what is climate, the difference about weather and climate, what is climate change, what is the forest carbon cycle, how the forest carbon cycle is related to the mitigation, then understanding climate policy, ecosystem services, we go and see a new way to value the role of forest to mitigate climate change, and it's just another option of payment of ecosystem services that is REDD. And explaining REDD in very basic, in a very basic level, first by defining what is deforestation, and defining what is degradation, and after defining what is those elements, how this is related to the impact of land use change and the historical land use change, how this is related to the amount of emissions that are contributing to the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So I'll go more into how this works in an agenda, but not just in this kind of approach and this kind of training is not just talking about these elements, but also developing skills. And this is another manual which contains 3 sessions. The first session is training design for communities, and say not all the time, and this is a kind of tips that we do not necessarily receive and we don't necessarily have when we assume that we are trainers or we are getting involved in developing workshops or sharing information. So it's certain tips of how to facilitate, how to use the resources and explain them, use activities, games, and also examples, such as the example that the lady gave us that was perfect, and actually it's one of the examples that is in the manual because it's very clear, very easy, and very fast to understand. And it's the sheets that you use. The amount of sheets is related to the amount of greenhouse gases. Let's take it to that level, that simple, make it hands-on, make it something that it's there, And then tips of how to organize a training, and then how to put those training skills in practice. This comes from certain tips of how to plan, and also how to, in certain points, if you have chance to organize a training and receive certain support, how to report back at least how many people came, what was the expectation, if they like, and also how to handle difficult situations when we are facilitating this kind of spaces of dialogue. So that is the manuals. The manual is a manual for the facilitator, for the formator, for the trainer. At the end is the manual for someone who is exchanging information and making a space of shared learning. And it contains 3 main manuals. The first one is all the guide of how to conduct a training for each session, all the key activities and certain tips of how to explain all these concepts and use these vocabulary cards. And the second one is the one with all the content. It's the purple one. This has the learning objectives of the session, the key glossary, terms that you should reinforce before you finish your session, and you make sure that it's understood. And the third one is a manual that is the tips. The green one that is the tips for facilitating and all the skills that could be useful to facilitate training. Again, this contains not only the 3 manuals, but certain activities that you can use, the glossary cards and also the posters. So we have around 18 posters for all 5 sessions. Posters that come and explain from the very beginning what is rain, what kind of eruptions, ocean currents, what is sunlight evaporation, photosynthesis, to what is the forest carbon cycle. I remember there was one there poster that was the carbon cycle, explaining how emissions and carbon capture works with the arrows with different colors, and then up to a poster that explains the difference between deforestation and all the emissions that happen when land use change occurs during time, and how the carbon stocks are reduced over time, and all this goes to the atmosphere. With the red arrow, you can see this as CO2, and the difference when you have a red activity, that the amount of forest that is avoided to be emitted is the one that is considered as an ecosystem service that could be retrieved. So I'll give a short example of the TO2 workshop agenda. We have the experience to work on it from 2-day to 5-day session. Ideally, it's a 4-day training, but not all the time it's possible. The 2-day training we have done it with basically with the government, state government representatives who were interested to replicate and share this kind of information within the organization. And well, look at this picture. This was an exercise we did in Peru with Johnson, and it was defining climate change. And the climate change here is defining 3 indigenous languages. It's for Quechua, for Alwajum, and for Shawu. This training was in the forest, and we only used the posters, the glossary cards, and no PowerPoint. But in the best case, it's good to do the first training with a PowerPoint, because you have approached the trainer for a very big amount of information with all the resources you have with a projector, up to how to handle it with only the toolkit. So day 1 basically is going through the basic of climate change, explaining the carbon cycle, and having guest speakers and make a dialogue. And the guest speakers are always very important to include in this kind of agenda, because they always bring into context all of these global definitions and all this content that is in a manual that we are using around the world, but that needs to be very general and very objective, And then it's just putting it into the reality of every case you are working on. Then on the day 2, we move ahead and work on talking about climate change policy. Day 2 is one of the most hard days because it has a lot of content. We go through all the history and all the evolution of the climate change policy, up to the definition of ecosystem services and PES, the schemes, and then go deep into red and take as much time as is needed until it's clear and it's a way that it could be simply understood, not go to all the acronyms and all the details that we have gone with red until today, but it's having a clear picture of what's going on that, and always having guest speakers from, for example, the government, and talking about how the red readiness and the red strategy is evolving in each country, having guest speakers also from the local governments to see how it's getting involved and it's linked, and also any additional dialogue games and examples that will help enhance and improve the learning experience there. The third day is fully employment training skills, and it's revisiting again all the sessions, but going each session, but going and revising it using the tool. Say, okay, you have the posters, the vocabulary cards, and the activities. How do you explain it? What are approaches you can take, how would you do it? What would you recommend? And this is really interesting, and it's a really learning experience also for us, because there are a lot of games that come up when we do these activities, you know, from playing lottery with the vocabulary cards, out to making a mimic of how the negotiation works. And then we give some time and make groups and let them prepare to present a training and do the training themselves on the last day, which is day 4, which is a training practice. And with the training practice, we all get together, we support, and we only we see how it evolves and how, if there are any specific terms that need to be reviewed. And finally, it's a training evaluation of how good it performed and how could it be better. So there are really certain example pictures there. Some of them were in Guatemala.